Seeking the wise.
With Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy.
Covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Welcome to the Wise podcast. Here with me today is the one and only Alexander.
Hello, beautiful people. So good to be with you.
And of course, I am Aaron. And today we are going to be exploring the polarities of energy. This came to me because I had a recent experience last week at bowling. It's funny how bowling is giving us a plethora of content here. But the experience I had is more around hype, the energy of hype. And it seems like the younger generations are talking more about hype and are addicted to hype and using that word a lot to hype themselves up and motivate themselves. What I think it's mostly, it's not like they're using it to motivate themselves to do things they don't really want to. It's almost like a faux confidence in a way. And we have talked about confidence, the difference between confidence and exemplification on the podcast before. So I think we're probably going to touch upon those things again, but then we're also going to dive a little deeper into other different instances where there are polarities and different energies. And one thing that I've noticed is in this polarity of energy, a lot of times one is like this empty energy, like it's non-authentic. There's nothing behind it. And then there's the opposite, which is the authentic energy. And just an example of that is our conversation between love and attraction. You have that attraction, and it's not to say like one's bad, one's good, but they're both kind of on the polarities of each other. That attraction is kind of like an empty thing, but it is that initial grab, and then that love is that wholesome, authentic energy that's on the other end of that.
Yes, and this is also we're gonna tie this into how people can beat themselves up when they fail. And this is kind of like setting up expectations. And we're going to kind of tie and ride expectations and hype, kind of like they're brothers and sisters. They're very, very similar. And so this is going to be a pretty well-rounded podcast around, as you're calling them, the polarities. So let's describe that. We are on a planet that is designed around polarity. Now, dualism is something else. And so polarity is part of nature. Polarity has to exist. For everything that is created, the opposite was created. So to whatever level you feel passionately about a certain subject, there has to be somebody else that feels equally passionate about the other side. This really helped me to get out of having to dig my heels in about stuff and work with the energy rather than against energies. But some people play the roles to play these separate sides, and see our second pillar in the just philosophy is around that polarity versus duality. And that duality is when you choose a side and you basically will fight and feel that your side is right and the other side is wrong. And there's a lot of that in the media. They use so many subjects to divide people. And when you keep people divided, you can control them. And so, but when you have the polarity view and you see that these opposites have to exist, this is a wonderful, experience that I had with like how this could be an example is with a Hare Krishna friend of mine. And we used to get together and we would play music together. We had completely different styles. And then we would talk philosophically, and I would speak of my philosophy, and he would not compare it, but he would give the similarity teaching from the Hare Krishna view. And so there was no competition. There was this acceptance that we have different ways of explaining this, but we respect each other. And that's how I would love to see society going in that direction, to be able for people to be comfortable enough in their truth that they don't feel challenged by somebody else having an opposite truth. And so anyway, that's part of the setup for how we're going to approach this. And getting into hype that you were talking about, a lot of people do that, especially in sports, to like pump themselves up. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that. But the polarity view of that means that however high you pump yourself up, and if you succeed, you get to ride that high. But to whatever level you pump yourself up and you don't succeed, then you have to experience that equal level of low. And so some people can process that and use those lows for motivation. And many times the best athletes in the world are able to do that. But in everyday life, it's more challenging for people to see it or to be driven by it. And many people are weighed down by it. And that's what we're going to dive deeper into, is how to not go in a downward spiral when you let yourself down.
Yeah. It seems like we use hype when we're in doubt, or when we're not, when we're not in that energy of knowing. Because I didn't want to use confidence there, because confidence and hype are similar. They're not the same, but they're similar, because you can have confidence and have some experience, but you're still not in a state of, I'm just here, I just do, like you haven't exemplified like Michael Jordan, but you're working towards that. So you may have some confidence because you may have been able to see some results of your practice. But the hype is like, it's almost like it's at the beginning of that, where you think you can do it, and so you're trying to hype yourself up to do it. So my experience starts last week. Was our last week of the summer league in bowling, and our team has won the first half, and we were in first place going into the end of this half, which is we would win the second half. And so for us, if we won the second half, to me, it would make sense that we would just win the championship, because we won the first half. And because the way the halves end is you keep track of how many wins you have, how many games you beat the other team. And then at the end, you go against second place. But however many games you are ahead is still in play. So for us last Thursday, we were up by 2 games over second place going into what they call the roll-off for the half. And so all we would have to do is keep that lead. But we had 2-game lead going in, and the most points you can get is 7. So we still had to win. But there was some uncertainty, because in the fall league, there was a rule in the league where you could only win 1 quarter, because it was a longer league, so it was in quarters instead of halves. So your team could only win 1. So if your team ended up winning another one, they would just take the second place, and that would be the winner of the quarter. So it's very like everybody gets a trophy type of rule, and which doesn't gel with me, because I'm very much into competition, and to me it takes away the incentive of a team who wins the first quarter. They're like, well, I can't win anymore, so why, like it takes away that incentive, that drive, for me anyway. For me, it would.
Well said for you. Yeah.
And that actually happened, where my team actually technically won 2 quarters, but we were only allowed to win 1. So fast forward, I knew this going into this league. I remember in the initial meeting that we had never discussed this rule, because if it did come up, I would have brought this up and said, I want to veto this rule. I want to change this rule. But it never came up. So part of me was like, well, maybe I should have brought it up to make sure, but I didn't. So shame on me.
Good
right
catch.
There. But leading into last Thursday, a week before, I asked the woman who's in charge, who's the secretary of the leagues, hey, Brenda, if we won the first half, if we win the second half outright, do we need to do a championship roll-off, because we would have won both halves and we're not going to bowl against ourselves? And she's like, yeah, that's how it is. And I was like, cool. So I went and told my team, and on my team, I have 2 younger 20s kids who this is the first time they've ever bowled. And they're coming from baseball, like playing college baseball. So they're very, into competition and
Team.
a little bit of hype. And again, like they're new to this. So they love the hype. And I love like the camaraderie, masculine energy that we have on our team with the younger energy, because like the high fives are more, intense and that type of thing. So I can get wrapped up in that. But anyway, I explained to them what I got from Brenda, which was, okay, all we have to do is win this half when we got it. And we won the first game. And so all we need to do was to win one more to seal the deal. And one of my buddies who runs the bowling alley came over and was like, "Oh, you should just let them win one." And I'm like, "What do you mean? We have to win two to win the championship." And he's like, "No, this week doesn't matter because there's still a roll off next week." And he was basically insinuating that rule from before was still in play, where it doesn't matter what we do this week, we're still going to face them next week because they're in second and we can't win this half. So we have to have the championship roll off the next Thursday, which is today.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I got passionate and, I explained to him, the conversation that I had with Brenda. And then I told my team what the deal was because I didn't want them, because we were all like hyped up. We won that first game and we knew we just needed one more. And at that point, it was like, well, what's the point? It's only going to serve us poorly if we continue to destroy them, if we continue to bowl our best, because it's only going to hurt us because our average is going to go up and then we're going to have less handicap for the championship. So at that point, I just told them, well, I'm just going to use this as a practice session and I'm going to, test the lanes, use different balls. I'm not going to try to bowl my best because at this point, it doesn't matter. It's actually going to hurt us if we do that because at this point, they kind of neutered us, we can't win anymore. So I'm just playing the game the way that it was played. But at that point, I felt like we were so hyped up because leading up to Thursday, we would send each other gifts of like different, hyped up baseball players and wrestlers and stuff like that, just to make sure we were at that level. And the young guys, they bowled the 3 days before Thursday. Like they practice so much they got blisters on their hands. And as soon as I said everything that was going on with passion, I saw Trey, one of the younger guys, he took on that passion, and then I immediately it went from me to him, and then I was able to be grounded and be like, okay, well let's not, I need you for next week, so let's not let this bother you. But anyway, it felt like all the energy left the room, and I felt it all week. I felt it. It's like it's not bad, but there's no hype, there's no energy. It's kind of just level, and it feels a little weird, because we're going for a championship this week, but there's no pump up. There's no looking forward to it. It's kind of just business as usual. So I've been kind of leading into that and messaging them and just saying, hey, this is good. All that hype is gone. Now we're here to do what we've practiced to do. And it's just business as usual. We're going to show up and we're going to, do what we've practiced. So I'm trying to lean into that, but it has felt way different the last week.
Yes, and this is very common, and I think we can relate this just in everyday life, not even just in sports. But see, anytime we overemphasize anything energetically or emotionally, that it increases the cost that we have to pay. Because if we understand that polarity view, that everything has a cost, that anything that you receive, it has a cost, and that becomes a practice in being careful in how we manage our energy and our emotions. Because I want to give another view here, if a person is doing a sport or an art project or whatever it is, just working their 9-to-5 job, and they carry an attitude of, well, what I do in life is I just do my best at everything that I do all the time. And I live in that. And if I fail at something, then immediately I learn something. I learn something from that failure. And that's my job as soon as I fail, rather than put that energy into sulking, into self-judgment or any of that. The energy is put into what was learned here. And then that becomes a building block. Okay, so failure is part of growing, and I'm going to do my best. And so, like you were saying, the rules here, and this is like the rules of this bowling thing is like rules of society. When you enter into the match, you've got to follow the rules. Kind of very similar when we go out into society, there's certain rules that we have to follow. But if the person that just sticks to, I'm just going to do my best every day, when the rule comes up, well, you could handicap yourself because if you play better this week than you do next week, then it could cause you to lose the championship. And seeing with the mindset that I'm looking at, the answer would be, well, I don't have any say in that. I'm just going to show up today and I'm going to bowl my best. And then I'm going to show up next week and I'm going to bowl my best. And if they beat us out of some technicality, then I don't get affected by those kinds of losses. I understand the rules of the game. And it's the same as when people try to offer me, money or special things for me to do events or to do projects with them. And that doesn't affect me because I'm clear in my intentional life. And I know that there's going to be opportunities that come or things that threaten that. So I think this is just a good example for a check-in to be of the world, but not part of that world. And, and it's opportunity to see that those young people have influenced you in a so-called beneficial way, like getting you pumped up. But see, the lesson there is that, well, the youth doesn't teach the cost because they don't focus on the cost. And that's where the elders come from to remind that cost. So see, there's nothing wrong with having that experience because I happen to feel you needed to have that experience to share it with our listeners and that type of thing and to be able to relate it to life. But how does that sound to you? Because see, that can seem to some people like I'm taking competition out of life. But what I'm suggesting is no, just keep the competition inside. And it's never, ever a competition externally. And that if you keep that competition inside and, oh, well, I lost this trophy and I didn't get this trophy, but I won inside because I did my best. And this is what I learned over this tournament. So anyway, I look so forward to hearing your feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, and it's because it's all intentional with your energy. And of course, my intention is to bowl the best I can every week with the level of knowledge and wisdom that I've gained through my practice. But
You got caught in the wave, which can
well,
happen
well,
to any
but
of us.
I do love the spirit of competition, and I do understand that there's a cost to it. The more emotional energy that you invest in it, and now I will just ask you about strategy because, like, if you went into Monopoly and were like, I'm just gonna practice building houses on a set of properties.
Mhm.
So you're not playing to win, but you're just focused on one area. So I can understand that because you're practicing understanding that part of the game.
Okay, let me clear up
Go
something
ahead.
here.
Yep.
That see again, strategy. And so with many people that plays Monopoly, they want to get Boardwalk and Park Place and the Pennsylvania, the greens. And is that once the board and Monopoly, what's always drove me crazy about that is that it's so lopsided. And and in the prices or the return of the properties. And so in any type of game like that, see, I think practicing strategy is useful. The competition comes in that, like, when I attempt to get Boardwalk or Park Place and my next roll is highly likely that I'm going to get it, and then somebody rolls before me and they get it. See, the competition part comes in with when they buy what I wanted, how does that affect me internally? And if it makes me begrudging or frustrated or something like that, see, then the practice of the philosophy is to shift that as soon as possible to stay in your strategy. Now it's just an adjustment of strategy. Okay, that didn't work out. That wasn't in the divine plan for me to get that. That was my intention. So what I've said over and over is it's not the strongest that will survive. It's not the smartest that will survive. It's the one that can adapt. So see, strategy is about being able to adapt. When people get stuck in their emotions, they're not able to adapt their strategy. So this is the point of that, is that you take that competitive energy that normally is spent external and you use it internal to adjust your strategy.
Okay. Well, okay. No, I got that. So if we lose the championship tonight,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna like be emotional. I'm not gonna be angry. I'm gonna be like, okay, well, lesson learned. First of all, I wasn't clear on the rules, and neither was the person who should have known the rules.
Right.
But I already took responsibility. I should have brought it up in the meeting, even if it wasn't brought up,
Well said.
which it should have been brought up.
Yes.
But I already took it because if it's so important to me, I need to make sure that rule is gone.
Yes.
Or at least voted on, because
Yeah.
if everybody votes for it to stay, then it will stay, and then I have a choice whether I want to stay in the league or not.
Well said. Yeah. Follow the
Yeah,
rules or choose a different path.
exactly. So if we lose the championship, like I'm not gonna be emotional about it. But just getting back to last Thursday when the rules changed on me, I shifted my energy because I was like, I could have been angry. Like there's a part of me because I know that I have this revengeful energy inside of me
Mm-hmm.
all my life. I think it's attributed to my Scorpio Mars in my natal chart.
Mm-hmm.
If you read about that, like it's like these people will wait lifetimes to get revenge. I know I have that inside of me. So initially I was like, let's just all roll gutter balls and protest
Sure.
this.
That's where
So
the
that
rebel
thought came up,
comes.
and then I was like, Aaron, no, come on. Do you really want to, be that person? No, I don't want to be that person. I don't carry myself that way.
Good
But
check-in.
I'm going to adjust my energy and I'm be like, okay, well, so if this is the game, if this really doesn't matter, then I'm going to use it as a practice session. And it's not like I purposely sucked, but I started throwing different shots that I normally wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
with balls I normally wouldn't to see how next week, if the lanes broke down the same way, how my ball would react. And so I was gaining information for the future.
Right.
But definitely wasn't trying to bowl my hardest.
Right.
It was like if I just went in for, a session, I was paying $3 for a game, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I adjusted my energy so that I stayed out of resentment. Because if I would have bowled my hardest and I didn't win anything, like I'm there to win. It's just how I am. Like there's many levels to the competition for me. It's the level to beat everybody else as a team, come together as a team to do that. But then there is like bowling is like 90% internal competition for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when people see me bowl, they're like, aren't you having fun? Why aren't you having fun? And this probably applies to 80, 90% of bowlers out there. If you see somebody bowling, normally they don't have any sort of like, they almost look angry after they bowl a strike
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly figuring out and learning for the next time. If I accidentally throw a ball the wrong way, how I wasn't intended to, and I get a strike, I'm not happy about that.
Right.
Yes, I get a strike, and everybody's like, oh, it looks the same up on the board.
Yeah.
Everybody says that.
Sure. Sure.
But I made a mistake, and I'm trying to learn what I did wrong because it's all about consistency. It's not about just getting a strike.
Right.
It's about how consistent can I get them.
And I think this is important for our listeners to be able to relate. Like, even if you're not into sports, relate this competition to when you get dressed up and, like, for instance, men and women go out and then they're many times comparing themselves to other people in the room, looking for who's getting attention. So that's like a competitive thing as well. So it's not just that this is in sports. It's in just everyday life. And sometimes when somebody doesn't get the promotion that they were expecting and somebody else in their department got that promotion. See, again, that's where a lot of these same emotions will come up, and they're useful teachers for us. If we can just see our emotions as just teachers, and they're giving us an opportunity to practice staying centered, practice staying grounded. And see, the point isn't to get to a point to where you don't experience those emotions. It's how quickly you can shift them. Sounds like you did a great job as you could have went down many emotional highways when the rules got changed in your view, especially after you tried to get clear on it. But it did teach you that, well, I won't ever play another tournament again without being clear of this rule. So therefore, yeah, if you lose this tournament or whatever in my world, that's still a win because now, no, I know a boundary that's very important to me. And I had the opportunity to speak up. I didn't. So that's what this tournament was really about, was for me to learn this lesson. And now if I win, that's going to be a bonus. But I've already got what I came to this particular tournament, to get. And I want to ask all the listeners to, do your best to just look anywhere. Sometimes it's with siblings in family and comparing like successes and things like that, because almost everyone carries competition somewhere. And there's a way that I happen to feel that you can recognize that competition in an external way and then just simply say, how can I turn that competition inside here? And that became my new competition. So I used to be extremely competitive, especially in basketball and other sports. But my competition shifted from playing against somebody else and trying to beat them to wanting to stay centered throughout the whole game. Whether I'm winning or losing, whether the guy that I'm guarding is better than me or not. Like, see, the practice in self-development is that I don't get knocked off a center no matter what is going on in my external environment. And when that becomes the most important thing to a person, then see, that's something that you can practice every day, just day in and day out, because everything becomes this competition with not getting knocked off center. Even if somebody catches you off guard and yells at you and belittles you, if you don't get angry, then see, you won that, as long as you're not detached. And we've talked about being emotionally, managing your emotions and then being emotionally detached. So I think that these are all good still examples, that the main thing was that I wanted to point out here is that you acknowledge that you made an adjustment in your perception, in your energy field, and your physical, and to acceptance in the spiritual. So see, you made an adjustment on all 5 levels to still continue to enjoy that evening. But what you're seeing is the cost of this week. Your team is not as pumped up as they were last week. And this is the cost of that, riding that emotional wave, is that it's not always there when you really need it, because it's more haphazard. And then there's a lot of energy expended through that. And so now you're seeing that they don't necessarily have it this week. And this is where a leader steps in and goes, okay, I've got to repump them up if that's going to be the game. Or it can be, hey, I just want to point out something here of how we lost gas because we weren't clear in the rules. And once we got clear, and so see, we're losing the internal fight here. And this is an opportunity for self-growth, blah, 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 blah. So it'd be interesting, to see how it plays out. But I think that you've already learned something, very valuable. And that's what I'm hoping our listeners are able to extract from that in their own experiences as well.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this free full version of the Wise podcast. Now, before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a second and say, if you are loving what you're hearing, we do have a complete conversation premium subscription option where you can get all of our back 160 plus episodes to utilize and further your self-growth journey. And you can do that by going to the wisewisepodcast.com, click on the Get Complete button at the top, and follow the instructions. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me and I will help you take care of them. But this is for the serious individuals who are ready to take that next step, ready to make their self-growth journey a priority, ready to enhance their relationships all around, ready to accept the world for how it is and no longer be torn by the duality of the external reality. Oh, I like that. So if that's you, if you want to take that next step, consider supporting us on this journey and sharing this information. Now, if you're looking for a little more Alexander and maybe a private consultation, you can reach out to him at his website, thejustphilosophy.com, or email him at alexander@thejustphilosophy.com. On his website, you will see his different offerings, a variety of relationship coaching, energetic design consultations, where we'll look at your human design chart and your destiny cards and provide a personal prescription for you. If you're in the North Carolina area, Alexander also has a variety of different sound journey events that are being posted on his website. He also is the inventor of the Vibertune sound therapy table, which 15 minutes on this vibrating table, listening to music that he composed, leaves you in a state of contentment. It feels like an energetic blanket has just laid upon you and you're back in the womb. It's a really great experience. So if you're in the North Carolina area and you want to reach out to him to even just ride the table, reach out to him at his email address. And of course, he has a variety of other tools and music that he's composed that you can get there. So, anyway, with that said, I want to get you back to the rest of this episode and thank you for working on you. Yeah, I was thinking it could go one of two ways. Either there is that energy that has escaped us and we're just kind of blah tonight as we go about it, or we're more focused and again, just doing what we've done, falling back on our practice and our integrity, basically. So, yeah, it will be interesting. And I will try to have a conversation with them about that. But you see this a lot in sports, in professional sports, in particularly when there's like this tremendous walk-off win, maybe for a team that hasn't, that hasn't really done anything all year, but they like win like the win your in game to get into the playoffs.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes that momentum can carry them. It depends on how
Yeah.
their perception is. If they're just like, well, everything else is just a bonus, so let's go in playing loose, I think that helps them. But if they're just like, we won our championship, that's when the energy escapes and then, they're just out. I mean, this can even happen to the best teams.
Yeah.
I don't know, for some reason, baseball is coming into my head. And baseball is like a series, each step of the playoffs. If like the best team that has won everything in that regular season goes into the playoffs, they're playing like the worst team and it's like a dogfight to game 7. And they just like, they win it on a walk-off home run to advance. They expend so much energy that they really shouldn't have had to. And maybe if their players have that mindset that, oh, we're the best, we're going to walk over these people, and then it ends up being a dogfight,
Mhm.
At the end of that series, they could just lose all their momentum, all that energy escape, like we talked about with the hype, and then they could just, lose in 4 games in the next series.
Yes, and that's normally why when you see the GOATs or the greatest of all time in whatever sport it is, very rarely are they over pompous or over they don't typically hype themselves up. There's some exceptions here. Like somebody that comes to mind is Deion Sanders. That was one of the most incredible cornerbacks there's ever been in football, and nobody hyped more than Deion. And there was a saying by one of my favorite bass players named Jaco Pastorius, jazz player, that had a saying that it's not bragging if you can back it up. So see, there's a difference between hype and you trying to psych yourself up because you don't feel like you've got the skills. But a lot of players that reach that level of skills, they don't need to hype because they've put the time into the practice. And so they're confident rather than needing to hype themselves up. And that becomes, different strategies for different players. Like I know Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant in basketball were two of the biggest trash talkers, in basketball. But see, they did it as a strategy, not as a way to pump themselves up. That's a big difference there. And so the main thing is that when you put your time into preparation, then there doesn't need to be a lot of words because you're ready to play. And Michael Jordan, what he looked at it is practice was more serious than a game. That if you put the work in at practice, then you can have fun in the game because you've prepared. You're ready for that shot because you've shot it 1,000 times this week. And somebody that's only shot it 30 times this week in practice, when they get that last shot, there's going to be more pressure on them. So this again is like getting back to self-development, is the more that you practice this that we're talking about in every area of your life, as soon as you compare yourself to somebody else, that's the easiest way I can think to simplify it. You're going to set yourself up for failure. And for those that are trying different things and they maybe fail, like a routine or practice, to help keep from going in a downward spiral, is that be lenient on yourself for one day, but for that day that you take off, then you really work with strong intention of tomorrow I've got to do this because I'm not going to go 2 days without doing it. It's too important. So to me, this takes the stress out of being a perfectionist. But it's just that if you need to give yourself a day off from, like, just say exercise, then through that day, you're going, tomorrow, I'm definitely doing it. That's, and it's not a hype. It's just a staying focused, staying on point with the intention of what's important to you. And see, those temptations are going to be there to not do it that second day and not do it that third day. So this is where people start really going into self judgment and downward spirals. But I think that if you don't shoot for perfection and you give yourself that leeway day for the week, this is why I like to suggest in my practice, I do my things typically 6 days a week. On the seventh day, I do something different that's still active. But see, I still give myself that 1 day of leeway through the week so that if I don't do it a certain day, I don't beat myself up. I just go, oh man, I've done it like 10 days in a row, or I'm certainly going to do it tomorrow and do it, make sure, get back on track. So I think that that's important for our listeners to hear is that through discipline, we do need to have that option that remember that that polarity is there, that we need to sometimes be kind to our bodies, be kind to our mind, not be so, not let your structure be limiting, but to have some flex in it. And this is why I like to use the word equilibrium rather than balance. Balance is like scales and it's equal. And equilibrium is more about like the ocean, the tides that come in, they're not perfect. There's an equilibrium in there, but when you take an over a whole month, then you can find these consistencies that's there. So I think that's important for people to hear is that discipline and structure and consistency of effort is three of the main points of the whole just philosophy. But see, there has to be flex in there too, so that you don't become too rigid.
Yeah, just another example of this similar energy. About a month ago, was I planned to have a past life regression, and I started telling people, "Oh, I'm doing this. I'm gonna
Mm,
find out the mysteries of the universe. I'm gonna, do all this stuff." And the previous week I had a hypnotherapy session as like a starter, to see if I was even able to be hypnotized or put into those relaxed states. And I was surprisingly. I'm a big control freak, so it did surprise me a little bit that I could.
yeah.
And that kind of went well. And actually, my hypnotherapy session was around self judgment and limiting that in my going to bed cycle that I've been working on for a while, and that did help with the self judgment,
Mhm.
and it did take away that sort of sting. Uh, so now I have no judgment over when I go to bed. I just realized that, oh, there's benefit here, or there's not.
Right.
Um, but anyway, I had told everybody that I was going to do this, and so again, like that hype energy in a way,
Mhm.
where I was like, oh, I'm
Subtle.
gonna,
Yeah.
and then when I got there, my mind couldn't get into that state. It is a little different than hypnotherapy, but it's very similar to like a guided meditation. And I just couldn't get my mind to go into that place. We tried 3 times. And while I'm there in this state, I'm having like self judgments come in, like, oh, why can't you do this?
Mhm.
And then after I realized, okay, well, I was also recording myself, so there was like that pressure in the back of my mind that I'm recording,
Mhm.
but also I told everybody all this, so now I have that doubt energy. And again, this is very similar to when we would play disc golf, and I would immediately say, hey, this is my best game ever, and
Yep.
then as soon as I said that, um, doubt came in because I'm just like, well, are you going to have the best game? Are you able to keep it up?
Right.
And then it's like the energy in my physicalness just went away.
Mhm.
It's bizarre. It's like the focus goes away because I immediately start second guessing
Well, we can see
myself.
it as we're basically inviting in the polarity. So the more that we speak stuff, and this has a little bit to do with our design, but I know in the human design, and you have the throat chakra activated, and so that is very powerful. But and this can help us to hone our language and say, I don't know how the game's going to turn out, but up to this point, this is the best game I've ever had. Like, see, there's not
Yeah.
necessarily a polarity that needs to be created there because you've brought it in, you've invited it in of I don't know how this is going to play out, but up to this point, it's the best game I've ever had, and I'm just going to enjoy that. And then you could bomb, the next 9 holes or whatever, and still carry the same amount of joy. Well, those first 9 holes were just the best game I've ever had. Instead of lamenting the downfall, so to say, because again, I happen to feel that everything in this life is basically leading us toward the release of resistance. And anything that we resist, that old saying, whatever you resist persists. There's such a truth in that. And so, if we can look as hypothetical that if you just look at your main practice is to pay attention to anything you have resistance to and to learn, we call it make love with the friction in life. And when you can just stop the resistance, then what I've proven many times in my life through lots of failures is that then that lesson doesn't need to show up for you anymore because you don't carry resistance to it. And it'll go find somebody else that has resistance and they can play together, so to say. So I think that's the biggest lesson of this whole talk here is just that hype builds the opportunity for resistance. And like I said, if the hype builds to a success, then there's a high that's ridden there by a lot of people. But see, they still have to experience that low sometimes. So the next tournament may not go as good, or the next basketball season for the team that wins the championship may not go as good. So see, they were on that high, and then they got to go through that low again. To where I remember one of the last recent championships, I don't remember if it was this past year in the NBA, the Denver Nuggets won it. I think it was 2 years ago. And there's a European player named Jovic that he was just walking around with his family and just like a regular business day or whatever. Everybody else is losing their minds in celebration. And the reporter went up to him and says, "How does it feel to be the world champions? And how are you going to celebrate?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go home and ride more horses. That's what I enjoy doing. My job's done. I don't know why these people are so excited, but we have a job to do, and we did our job, and that's what we get paid for. Now I'm going to go ride my horses." And so, see, to me, that doesn't make him less competitive. It doesn't make him enjoy it less. He's just not going to ride that emotional wave of have to reach that low whenever they're struggling or injured or something like that. And so that's what I'm talking about. There's not a loss of joy experienced for the person that doesn't show it externally. It's able to be maintained. It's keeping the coals burning slow rather than burning hot fast and burning out. And so, so I think there's been some great examples that you've given. I know that I've got tons of failures like that as well that help to lead me to this view and turning that competition inside, and it just becomes I'm looking for anything that knocks me off center, and I'm always going to work to stay on center, and I'm going to exemplify that for younger people or whoever's around. Was like what I chose to do. I'm not projecting that on you or anyone else, but there's not much of a loss of competition. There's still a lot because competition can drive people, and so that to me, when you turn that inside, then that's an ongoing competition, and you don't beat yourself up when you lose. You learn something, and you're able to communicate that with others. That's why I enjoy telling people that are close to me when I fail at something, because right after I say what I failed at, I'm going to tell them what I learned, what I'm going to do next time to be better, and how I'm going to strengthen this direction. And that's what I wish the language of our culture would become more and more about.
Yeah, is that like a reverse psychology in the face of the universal energy? Is instead of talking about what you could do and invite that doubt in, you talk about what you failed at, so that invites the good stuff
Yeah,
in.
I mean, as it would be a worthwhile practice, and I can certainly say that I've practiced and played around with that, and this is the beauty of being on the earth plane and there being this polarity. Because see, when the polarities are guaranteed, and you learn to live in non-preference, which is another value system of the philosophy, then you've got more flexibility in the roles that you play. And then in your communications, you learn to I call it communicate in a 360-degree view. That if you talk about something maybe that you don't prefer and it comes out, like a green bean casserole. But then I say, but I look forward. Normally, I don't really care for green bean casserole, but I look forward to experiencing yours because I've never had your green bean casserole, and I'm open to it being the most incredible thing that I've ever eaten. So see that helps to bring equilibrium into the mindset, is that you're not just choosing good and bad and right and wrong. You're choosing to see that in everything that you see, and there's no more external competition. It's all useful. It's all useful if you're truly a student of life.
And just to bring this back around to self development work, you mentioned the resistance. So, this energy would be at play when we are resisting not living up to our standard of perfection when doing this work. And so that's where the self judgment is born, is where we have this idea of where we need to be right now. We're
Mhm.
trying to rush our development. Um, so it's almost more goal oriented or more like absolute oriented versus the flexibility that you just talked about, where if we have an intention to be better and to practice this stuff, then then that self-judgment may not be invited in as much because we have an intention we're working towards.
Right.
But I think it comes with a person's temperament. So with somebody like me, I feel like I invited a lot of self-judgment in
Mhm.
because of my competition. I'm heavy in competition, heavy in that masculine competition energy. So of course I'm gonna be competing with myself, and oh, there's something I want to do. Okay, I'm gonna be the best at it,
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's where all that comes in, where maybe you have somebody who's not into competition. Maybe they would be the person that would not have so much self judgment. So I guess this is just a relationship there between
Yeah.
competition and maybe self judgment.
Yes, and most people are on different levels of that. It's just that the more so-called passion you carry for that, the more heat element, then the more of the water element you got to go through. When it doesn't turn out your way. And yes, the person that oscillates very little in that, then whether they win or lose, they're not knocked off center. They're not. Again, their drive, that competition just comes into, I'm just going to do the best that I can today. And if I want to do better, then I will practice more. And that's where, I really enjoy playing disc golf. I play once a week, almost every week, with a friend that's my off day from practicing the calisthenics workout of the 5 levels, but I walk like 5 to 6 miles almost every Sunday. And so in that, he and I don't really play against each other. He keeps tracks of our scores at each course, and before we play, he shares like what I made on the last time we played there and what he made on last time. And then that becomes incentive to like, well, I want to beat my last. It's not a competition with him. Therefore, we're able to support each other. When we have a great throw, it's like, wow, man, it was so cool to watch that. Because we're not competing with each other, we're competing internally with ourselves. And I've stayed very consistent. I've been very consistent in my playing for 2 or 3 years. But see, I know that if I wanted to be better, then I would play 2 times a week. And I'm sure that you've done this in bowling. That, of course, the more you play, normally the better that you will get at something. But see, it's not interesting enough for me to be better because I get such a well-rounded experience of being with my friend, being out in nature, and it not really being about my end score. And so again, the competition is still that if I did way worse than last time I played, then the point is for me to shift my perception into how much I enjoyed being with my friend, being out in nature, and not beat myself up for being less than in the past. And that's what this type of training the mind turns into, is that there's a healthy view of competition and it's for self-improvement. And the external competition, I happen to feel, is just an introduction to that. And the more, yeah, competitive externally somebody is, it shows the more opportunity that they have in their self growth, the more that they turn that internal. And so, and there's just a lot less normally cost to that internal competition. if you're not striving for the perfection. You're just looking to do your best. And to do your best each day doesn't hold what perfection holds. Perfection means that you got to, reach a certain level and then hold that. And what I'm bringing in is equilibrium here is no, you don't hold perfection. Nobody's going to do that. There's going to be oscillation. So you got to learn to make love with that oscillation. And when you play your best, you don't get overly excited or hyped. And when you play maybe your worst, you don't get overly down or discouraged. And this just becomes a mental state and a lifestyle. And yes, the people that have more passion, they have more of a challenge, but they also have more of an opportunity. So I like to say that I don't feel that anybody's work is any harder than anybody else's. What's different is different time frames of when we learn lessons or traumas happen to us. They can be more challenging to get over because of where we're at in our development when the situation happens. But again, staying away from comparing, oh, my life's harder than such and such or anything like that is wise.
Yeah, and just in my journey of being a very competitive human and working on self development, I feel like it's utilizing the competition more for motivation instead of domination.
Yes, well
And
said.
so if I don't want to get off the couch to exercise, then I can intentionally find some sort of like competition to motivate myself to do that
Yes.
versus like, oh, I'm gonna, dominate again and get into that perfectionist
Yes, and
energy.
I think this is a great place to point out accountability. And so, see, that competition and accountability can be like you can switch competition to accountability. And that's kind of what I'm talking about is that like, well, I don't want to work out today. Then it's okay. I'm gonna have a talk with myself like I would an 8-year-old child that wants to be a professional basketball player. And when you say, okay, are you willing to practice every day to do that? And then when the day comes up that they don't want to practice, hopefully the parent or the coach can be like, okay, I'll give you this day, but tomorrow we got to get back at it. And then you got to go a minimum of maybe, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days without another day off or something like that. But this is where the structure and the schedule comes in, and it can be very helpful. So that's what I want to suggest to people here that if you want to practice the 5 levels practice of the just philosophy, or practice one a day, set a time, try to keep it consistent. Start with like 3 minutes, just to where you can do 3 minutes consistently and shoot for 6 days a week. But if you happen to have an off day to where you don't want to practice something, then accept that and do it 5 out of 7. But like I said, when you give yourself that day off, do your best to set in your schedule to not give yourself more than one day off a week. And and so if you finish up with 5 days most week, some weeks 6 days, then again that can be incentive to try to set records for yourself, not expectations, but just go. Well, I want to not work out today, but I've been working out for 10 straight days. And so, yeah, or meditating or gratitude practice or whatever it is in the 5 levels practice, or getting better at something, whether it be a sport or an art or something like that. Just remember this the consistency of effort over a long period of time that is the biggest factor. So try to set your time frames in a realistic time frame to succeed at those, which builds incentive to stretch those time frames and go start off with like maybe 3 minutes of each of the 5 levels a day. And that's going to be 15 minutes a day is all that takes. But the hope is that you'll do that consistently, maybe for 3 weeks. And then you go, well, I want to extend this to, 6 minutes each one. So that turns into 30 minutes. And then I slowly work that up to being now about an hour to hour and 45 minutes for me to do, all 5 levels at 20 to 30 minutes of each level. And so that's what I'm hoping to inspire people to get into. And it turns into a thirst after you get past the structure and the discipline and accountability. And so anyway, I look forward to our listeners, giving feedback, asking more questions. But I think this was a very worthwhile subject to touch on, and it's both of like following how to deal with disappointment and judgment, and then how not to get sucked into other people's energies. Because I see it just as well as it's mainly a practice for you. If these young people are getting hyped up, see, it's easy to get sucked into that energy. The wise person may go, oh, it's beautiful that these youth have all these expectations and everything. They've got a lot to learn. I'm going to just stay focused and I'm going to do my best. And I'm not going to get caught in that. Hey, I'll high five you. Yeah, but I'm not going to get all into that energy because I'm here to be a different kind of example. But again, if you don't want to be that example, you don't have to. But yeah, I do appreciate that you're bringing a lot of subject matter from the bowling because you're out in public around the general population, which is the place to do this work. And so it's not a judgment on these people that they're not doing the work or anything like that. It's that's what wise people do is they put themselves in everyday situations to see how to manage their energy and getting caught into other people's energies and these types of things. So it's a wonderful place to be doing, self-development.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess we'll wrap this one up. I appreciate you guys listening. And we'll try to do another episode on how to be able to stay in that authentic energy maybe sometime in the future. I think there's still a lot on that bone to pick.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in.
Much love, everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.